The air hung heavy with the scent of polished brass, wilting lilies, and unspoken grief. A crisp autumn wind, carrying the distant wail of a lone bagpipe, swept through Arlington National Cemetery, rustling the flags that stood at solemn attention. Today was the final farewell to General Thomas Maxwell, a titan of modern warfare, a strategist whose campaigns had reshaped continents, and a leader revered by presidents and privates alike. Dignitaries in somber suits, medals glinting on military uniforms, and a phalanx of media cameras lined the hallowed grounds, each person a testament to the general's formidable legacy. Amidst the hushed reverence, a small, almost imperceptible ripple of unease began to spread near the cordoned-off VIP section. It started with a polite but firm request, escalating quickly to a more insistent barrier. The object of this attention was an old man, stooped with age. His threadbare tweed coat a stark contrast to the immaculate attire surrounding him. His face, a roadmap of wrinkles, was etched with a quiet determination that belied his frail frame. Elias Thorne, a name unknown to the assembled elite, merely wanted to pay his respects. "Sir, I'm afraid this area is restricted," a young, impeccably uniformed protocol officer stated, his voice a practiced blend of authority and deference. He gestured vaguely towards the velvet ropes. "Only invited guests and authorized personnel are permitted beyond this point." Elias's eyes, the color of faded denim, remained fixed on the flag-draped casket, a distant, almost wistful expression on his face. "I understand, son," he rasped, his voice gravelly with disuse. "But I knew Tom, knew him well. I need to say goodbye." The officer, Lieutenant Miller, shifted uncomfortably. He had been briefed on the guest list, a meticulously curated document of power and influence. There was no Elias Thorne on it. "I'm sorry, sir. Without proper credentials, I cannot allow you through. Perhaps you could join the public viewing area." He pointed to a distant cluster of ordinary citizens, separated by several hundred yards in a thicket of security. Elias didn't even glance in that direction. "Tom wouldn't want me in the cheap seats," he murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He always said, "Elias, you're too important to be relegated to the back," even when we were knee-deep in mud and, well, never mind that. He took a shuffling step forward, his gaze unwavering from the casket. Another officer, a burly sergeant with a stern jaw, stepped in front of Elias, blocking his path more definitively. "Sir, you're causing a disturbance. Please, cooperate." His voice was low, firm, edged with a warning. A few heads turned. A reporter, sensing a minor human interest story, subtly aimed her camera. Elias ignored them all. His focus was singular, almost obsessive. "He always hated these formal affairs," Elias continued, as if speaking to himself, or perhaps to the general's spirit. "Said they were for the living, not the dead. But he'd appreciate the turnout, I suppose, especially the brass." He nodded towards the front rows, where a phalanx of generals, their chests adorned with ribbons and stars, sat rigidly. The sergeant sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He reached out, a hand hovering near Elias's arm, ready to guide him away. Just then, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a sharp suit, a former senator perhaps, leaned over to his companion. "What's the commotion about?" he whispered. "Some old fellow trying to crash the VIP section," came the hushed reply. "Claims he knew General Maxwell. Probably a senile veteran looking for attention." The words, though not meant for him, seemed to prick Elias. His faded eyes hardened slightly. He scoffed, barely audible. "The only attention I ever wanted from Tom was a straight answer, and he rarely gave me one without a fight." He tried to sidestep the sergeant, a surprising agility in his aged movements. The sergeant, caught off guard, stumbled slightly, his face flushed with annoyance. "That's enough, sir. You're disrupting a state funeral." The tension escalated. The low murmur of the crowd grew slightly louder. The bagpipes, which had momentarily ceased, began their mournful lament again, a counterpoint to the quiet struggle. Elias, despite his age, possessed a stubborn resilience. He wasn't loud, he wasn't aggressive, but he But he was immovable. He simply wanted to be closer. His mind, a vast archive of memories, drifted back, not to grand battles or strategic triumphs, but to a small, dusty outpost in a forgotten valley decades ago. The air then had been thick with the smell of cordite and fear, not lilies and polished brass. It was 1968. The monsoon season had turned the jungle into a swamp. Each step a sucking fight against the mud. Lieutenant Thomas Maxwell, barely out of West Point, was green, ambitious, and terrified. His platoon, pinned down by relentless enemy fire, was taking heavy casualties. Maxwell, his face streaked with grime and sweat, clutched his rifle, his mind racing, trying to find a way out of the impossible situation. Then a voice, calm and steady amidst the chaos, cut through the din. "Lieutenant, to your left. There's a drainage ditch, barely visible. We can use it for cover." Maxwell spun around, It was Sergeant Elias Thorne, a grizzled veteran whose uniform seemed to have absorbed the very essence of the jungle. Thorne was older, perhaps in his late 20s, early 30s, but he moved with the quiet efficiency of a predator. He wasn't a leader in rank, but in experience. He was a general. "Thorne, what are you talking about? We're exposed here," Maxwell shouted back, the sound of bullets whizzing past their heads almost drowning him out. "Trust me, Lieutenant," Thorne yelled, already moving, low to the ground, towards a tangle of overgrown roots. "It's a long shot, but it's our only shot." Maxwell hesitated for a split second, then made a decision that would define his career and perhaps save his life. He trusted the instinct of the older, more experienced man. He barked orders, and his remaining men, battered and weary, followed Thorne's lead. Crawling through the mud towards the hidden ditch, it was a grueling, terrifying crawl. The ditch was shallow, filled with stagnant water and leeches, but it offered just enough cover to allow them to regroup, to breathe, to formulate a Thorne, always vigilant, always thinking, had spotted a weakness in the enemy's flanking maneuver, a blind spot they could exploit. He whispered a plan to Maxwell, a daring, almost suicidal push through a dense thicket. "It's risky," Sergeant Maxwell had said, his voice tight. "War's risky," Lieutenant Thorne had replied, his eyes scanning the jungle. "But we don't have another option if we want to see tomorrow." They launched the camp. It was brutal, hand-to-hand combat in the suffocating humidity. Thorne, a blur of motion, fought with a savage grace, protecting Maxwell's flank, pulling him out of harm's way more than once. They broke through, scattered the enemy, and against all odds, survived. That day, Lieutenant Thomas Maxwell learned a profound lesson. True leadership wasn't just about rank or strategy. It was about knowing when to listen, when to trust, and when to follow the quiet wisdom of those who had seen more. Elias Thorne became more than just a sergeant. He became Maxwell's shadow, his unofficial advisor, his silent guardian. He was the man who taught Maxwell how to survive, how to lead, how to understand the brutal realities of war far beyond what any textbook could convey. Thorne never sought promotion, never craved recognition. He was content to be a sergeant, a soldier's soldier, a man who found his purpose in the trenches, not in the decorated halls of power. After the war, he simply faded away, a ghost of a conflict, returning to a quiet life, while Maxwell's star rose, ascending through the ranks with meteoric speed. They exchanged a few letters in the early years, then life intervened, and their paths diverged, the bond of shared trauma and respect remaining unspoken, a silent understanding. Back at the funeral, the four-star General Armitage, a man whose own career had intersected with Maxwell's at various points, stepped forward to the podium. His uniform was impeccable, his bearing regal. He was slated to deliver the primary eulogy, a testament to Maxwell's enduring impact on the armed forces. As General Armitage adjusted the microphone, his eyes swept over the assembled crowd, a practiced glance that took in every detail. His gaze lingered for a moment on the small commotion near the velvet ropes. He saw the old man Elias still trying to push past the security, his face a mask of quiet desperation. He saw the exasperated sergeant, the whispering a flicker of something recognition, confusion, annoyance crossed Armitage's face. He paused, his hand still on the microphone. The bagpipes had just finished their mournful strains, leaving a vacuum of silence that amplified the low, insistent voices of the security detail. "Sir, this is your last warning. We will have to escort you out." The sergeant's voice was now sharp, devoid of any remaining politeness. He took a step closer to Elias, his hand firmly on the old man's arm. Elias, surprisingly, didn't resist the touch. His eyes, however, were no longer fixed on the casket. They had shifted, almost instinctively, to General Armitage. A spark of something, a distant memory, seemed to ignite in their depths. General Armitage, from his vantage point, saw the exchange. He saw the old man's face, the way his eyes, though clouded by age, held an intensity that was strangely familiar. And then, as the sergeant began to pull Elias away, Elias did something that stopped Armitage cold. He didn't shout, didn't struggle. He simply looked at the casket, then back at Armitage, and with a barely audible whisper he said, Tell Tom I remembered the ditch." The words, though faint, seemed to carry across the hushed expanse, reaching General Armitage's ears. The ditch. The phrase, seemingly innocuous, struck Armitage like a lightning bolt. He had heard that story before, long ago, from Maxwell himself. A story about a desperate situation, a hidden drainage ditch, and a sergeant who had saved his life. Armitage's eyes narrowed, focusing intently on Elias. The old man's face, though aged and weathered, began to resolve into a faint, almost ghostly image of a younger man, a man he had seen only in faded photographs, a man whose legend was whispered in hushed tones among the old guard. He remembered Maxwell, late one night in a dimly lit officers' club, after a few too many whiskeys, recounting the tale of his first true test under fire. There was this sergeant, Maxwell had slurred, his eyes distant, Elias Thorne, quiet fellow, never said much, but he saw things no one else did. He pulled me out of a firestorm, taught me more in an hour than West Point did in 4 years. If it wasn't for Thorne, I wouldn't be here. Armitage had dismissed it then as a drunken recollection, a romanticized memory of a young officer's formative experience. But now, seeing the old man, hearing those words, the ditch a chill ran down his spine. It couldn't be. The sergeant was now firmly escorting Elias towards the outer perimeter. "Sir, you're making this difficult." General Armitage made a decision. It was impulsive, completely against protocol, and would undoubtedly raise eyebrows. But something deep within him, a sense of history, of profound respect, compelled him. He stepped away from the podium, leaving the microphone live, its faint hum, the only sound in the sudden silence. All eyes, which had been fixed on him, now followed his movement. He walked, not towards the casket, but directly towards the struggling old man. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The security detail, frozen in confusion, watched as the 4-star general, a man of immense power and prestige, strode purposefully towards the uninvited guest. Lieutenant Miller, bewildered, snapped to attention. The sergeant released Elias's arm, his face a mixture of shock and apprehension. General Armitage stopped directly in front of Elias Thorne. The old man, still slightly disoriented from the attempted escort, looked up, his faded eyes meeting the piercing gaze of the general. Then, in a gesture that transcended rank, ceremony, and all established protocol, General Armitage raised his right hand to his brow. His salute was crisp, precise, and imbued with a profound reverence that silenced every whisper, every murmur, every rustle of clothing. It was a salute not just of respect, but of honor, of gratitude, and of recognition. The entire cemetery seemed to hold its breath. The media cameras, which had been subtly filming the minor disturbance, now whirred openly, capturing the astonishing moment. Elias Thorne, the old man in the threadbare coat, stood utterly still. His eye, for the first time, welled up, not with tears of sadness, but of a long-buried emotion, perhaps relief, perhaps vindication. He didn't salute back. He simply nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible dip of his head, a silent acknowledgement of a shared history that only a handful of people in the world truly understood. General Armitage held the salute for a long moment, then slowly lowered his hand. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and resonant, carrying across the hushed grounds without the aid of the microphone. "Sergeant Thorne," he said, his voice filled with a quiet authority that commanded attention. "It is an honor to see you here." He turned slightly, addressing the stunned crowd, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the dignitaries and the media. "Many of you knew General Maxwell as a brilliant strategist, a decorated leader, a man who shaped our military doctrine, but few of you know the man who truly forged him." He turned back to Elias, a faint, respectful smile on his lips. General Maxwell often spoke of a pivotal moment in his early career, a time when he was pinned down, facing certain defeat. He spoke of a sergeant, a quiet, unassuming man who saw a way out when no one else could. A man who, through sheer courage and tactical brilliance, saved not only his platoon but, in doing so, laid the foundation for the leader General Maxwell would become. Armitage paused, his gaze fixed on Elias. That man was Sergeant Elias Thorne. He was the one who saw the ditch. He was the one who taught a young Lieutenant Maxwell the true meaning of leadership under fire. He was a hero in the truest sense, a man who sought no glory, only to serve. A wave of murmurs, hushed and awestruck, swept through the crowd. The security officers, their faces pale, looked at each other in disbelief. The reporters furiously scribbled notes, their initial human interest story having exploded into a revelation of profound historical significance. "Sergeant Thorne," General Armitage continued, his voice softer now, "you have every right to be here. More right than most." He gestured towards the casket. "General Maxwell would have wanted you here, front and center." He then turned to the security detail. "Ensure Sergeant Thorne is given a place of honor." Immediately the sergeant, still reeling, stammered, "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." He quickly moved to offer Elias's arm, guiding him gently towards the front row, where a seat was quickly vacated by a red-faced senator. Elias's old eyes still glistening, allowed himself to be led. He didn't say anything, but as he passed the casket, he reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the flag-draped wood. It was a silent, private farewell, decades in the making, a final communication between two men whose lives had been irrevocably intertwined by the crucible of war. General Armitage watched him, then slowly returned to the podium. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had begun as a formal, almost impersonal ceremony had been transformed by a single act of recognition, a salute that honored not just the fallen general, but the forgotten hero who had helped shape him. As General Armitage finally began his eulogy, his words carried a new weight, a deeper meaning. He spoke of General Maxwell's courage, his vision, his unwavering commitment. But now, every word was imbued with a silent understanding that much of that greatness had been quietly nurtured. Long ago, in a muddy ditch, by a humble sergeant named Elias Thorne. The funeral, no longer just a farewell, became a poignant reminder that true heroism often walks unseen, and that the greatest leaders are often shaped by the quiet wisdom of those who serve without fame. The old man, finally seated, his eyes fixed on the casket, was a living testament to that truth.